What's up, everybody? Izzy here, back again with another Q&A today. This one is an absolute doozy. So, let's get to the first question right away. Is there a way to grow taller after puberty? Bro, if there was, don't you think I'd be taller? I mean, listen, I'm well past any insecurities about height at this point in my life, but if there was something that made you taller after puberty, there wouldn't be any more short people. It's like that Joe Rogan joke about dick pills. If there was like dick pills that actually worked, there would be men all over the world abusing dick pills, and the last small dick would be gone because everybody would be on dick pills. No, there's really nothing you can do unless you want to get a mohawk or do height increasing shoes. Your only option is this insane surgery called leg lengthening surgery, where they literally like break your tibias or your femurs, and then they put this weird splint on it that keeps them just separated by millimeters, the breaks in your bones, and then the bone fills in those millimeter breaks and makes your legs a little bit longer. Some people have lifelong pain after that. No thanks. How do I go from a lazy person to a hardworking person? Here's the answer that you're not going to like. It's not worth it to you to be hardworking, which is the only reason that you're not. There's only two ways to change your behavior on a massive scale. One is to become greatly dissatisfied with your life, and the other is to want something that you don't have so bad that you're willing to go through discomfort. The reality of modern life is that most people work 40 hours a week and then come home, and for 6 to 8 hours a day, they watch the most amazing entertainment ever created. Wizards casting spells, explosions, super powered people on TV shows, amazing, fantastic images that previous generations never had access to. They eat whatever delicious, hyper palatable food they want. You could have pizza for every meal. You could have sugar cereal. You could have microwave taquitos. You could have delicious food every single meal. You never go through a period where you can't afford meat and you just have to eat boiled potatoes for every meal. And not only that, you don't even have to like go out and socialize. You can just jerk off to unlimited, endless porn if that's what you want to do. So on a biological level, why would you change? All your needs are being met constantly. You're constantly comfortable. You have everything you want. You have numbing agents, whether it's entertainment or actual drugs or your phone as a distraction. To erase any bad feelings that you have, you can just pop open your device and find some entertainment to numb yourself for a bit. Why would you change under those circumstances? Well, I can tell you, you wouldn't, and you're not, and that's why you're not. It's because you are too comfortable, and there's nothing that you want bad enough to change your behavior and make you go after it with everything that you've got. But that's the only solution, is you have to find something that you want bad enough that you're willing to work for it, because working is uncomfortable. Working is hard. And if you can just sit around being satisfied all the time, you're not going to work. So you either have to remove a lot of those comforts yourself, or you have to find something that's worth being uncomfortable for. It's the only way. You're not an inherently lazy person. You just don't want anything enough. And everything you do already is already good and comfortable. Do you believe pull-ups count when you weigh over 220 pounds? The pull-up inflation is real right now. So, you know what's funny, man, is we all recognize, like with barbell rows, that you can have somebody who rows 5 plates, and it's just a sloppy fucking mess. They're swinging it all over the place. It's a half deadlift. They're using tons of momentum and help from the hip extensors to row the weight, right? To the point where, like, if somebody tells you that they row 315, you have no idea if that's like a joke of a swinging trap hump movement, or if they're like strict rowing 315 from the ground from a deficit Penley style or something, and they're actually strong as Pull-ups are actually the same thing. If you say I can do 220 pull-ups for reps, I have no idea if you're barely clearing your nose over the bar, if that's chest to bar, if that's with eccentric control, if you're kipping. I have no idea if 220 is good. Okay, I'm old and I should know better, but quick clarification on that last video about rows. I am not calling anybody out specifically. Here's all I'm trying to say. If you're a 405 deadlifter doing 315 rows, that's suspect. If you're a 6-plate deadlifter doing 3-plate rows, 3.5-plate rows, that makes about sense. That's probably right. If you're a 6-plate deadlifter doing 5-plate rows, again, pretty suspect. If you're an 8-plate deadlifter doing 5-plate rows, that makes sense. And congrats on achieving silverback status. But pull-ups are really the same thing. If you can find me somebody doing 220 pull-ups, total weight, whether that's body weight or weight added, and they're doing all of the following: pulling the bar to at least upper chest, if not sternum, using at least a 3 count or a 2-second eccentric, a brief pause in the stretch. To me, that's impressive work. It counts. What are good strength standards? 405 bench, 500 squat, 600 deadlift? No, there are no good strength standards. I don't believe there are good strength standards because, for one, you'd have to answer the question of what strength standards for what? Naturals, enhanced, men, women, teenagers, adults, people under 150 pounds, people over 250 pounds. These people shouldn't all be held to the same standard. That's absolutely ridiculous. Like, strength standards to determine what we find impressive. I mean, I guess that depends on which videos you watched on social media today. You know, I've recently seen videos of teenagers bench pressing over 500 pounds. That seems pretty impressive to me. I mean, yeah, it's just, no, there really isn't. There are no good strength standards. It's just not something where you can put everyone into the same box, no matter how hard you want to try. Thoughts on Ben Yannis? I don't want to talk about Ben specifically because he can't defend himself here, but what I do want to talk about is social media biomechanics, especially on TikTok and Instagram. Biomechanics is a really hard math and science-based degree. You need to be proficient in math and science. Okay, it's not something that you can learn by copying N1 courses and attending N1 seminars. You are not a biomechanist just because you can copy Coach Kaz. Okay, and this shows up in a way that a lot of these people talk about biomechanics as if you could say that one exercise is better than another based on a first pass biomechanical analysis, when in fact, studies consistently show no hypertrophy differences in terms of total hypertrophy between, say, free weight squats and leg press. So, again, how about the example last year of like wide grip pull-ups are only the Terrys, no lats. Then a bunch of studies came out directly measuring lat hypertrophy and wide grip pull-ups and wide grip pull-downs. And what did they find? Tons of lats. These people don't have a biomechanics degree. They're just influencers. How does muscle affect mindset? Should I make an effort to avoid certain types? I really, really hope I'm misinterpreting what you're saying here. But are you asking me if you should avoid certain people because they're jacked? Like that's going to give them a bad attitude? Are you like the dude that crosses to the other side of the sidewalk when you see someone with tattoos? Or like it's like 6 p.m. and the sun's going down, they got a hoodie on, so you better like make a wide berth? Are you fucking serious? I'm moderately jacked. Do I seem scary to you? Like someone you should avoid? Is it true that more stable exercises are better for hypertrophy? Yes, that is true. A more stable exercise will basically have less stabilizer involvement, which is going to decrease perception of effort. It's going to allow the target muscles to work harder. Now, here's the problem, is that people will take that little piece of information, take it out of context, and then apply it in broader strokes than it was ever intended to be applied in. So, for example, they will say, because a hack squat is more stable than a free weight squat, it is always better for hypertrophy. Or a leg press is more stable than a free weight squat, so leg press is always better for hypertrophy. And yet, consistently, when we have studies testing things like close grip bench versus pushdowns, skull crushers versus pushdowns, we find no meaningful differences in total hypertrophy between the machine exercises and the free weight exercises. So whether that's because there are other factors at play or not, it doesn't really matter. You can't say machines are always better because stability. Can someone get just as jacked using only orals? Oh, man, answering the drug questions from 20-year-olds. But here's the thing. If I don't answer this, you'll get the information from someone who just tells you what you want to hear, and you'll hurt yourself. You can get very jacked doing just orals, but not as jacked as someone that uses injectables as well, because orals are hepatotoxic. They're bad for your liver. You can't run them in as high of doses, nor can you run them for as long. And if you try to make a career, let's say, of running oral-only cycles, you are going to fuck up your liver. It's something that should be used sparingly. Personally, I don't even use orals at all unless I am getting very, very lean. I don't use them while gaining weight at all, and that's because they provide no special benefits, really, over injectables for pure hypertrophy purposes, and at the same time, they are more expensive to your health. If you're afraid of needles, steroids are not an option. Which athletic accomplishment do you consider the most impressive? To be honest, man, I just don't really play this game because I don't know how. Like, how do you compare Tiger Woods to Michael Jordan? How do you compare Tom Brady to Serena Williams? How do you compare someone who hits 400 for a whole season in baseball to somebody that knocks out all of their opponents in every single fight they've ever had? I don't know how you can compare things across sports. Like, how do you compare an ultra marathon runner to somebody breaking the Olympic world record in the clean and jerk? I think they're all impressive in their own ways, and I just try to appreciate them each for what they are. What are the current shoulder exercises in your program? So honestly, if you just go to the video that I posted yesterday, or the stories that I posted yesterday, which obviously you saw some of them since you submitted this question, that's all I do. I have my compound shoulder movement is the high incline press. It's probably like a 75 or 60 degree incline on the Strive machine. And I do seated laterals, behind the back cable laterals, and then I do a rear delt cable fly. And that's literally it. It's just shoulder press and laterals, man. Pretty basic stuff. I am experiencing exertion headache when doing leg extensions to failure. So when it comes to exertion headaches, I can really only give you the standard advice, which is make sure that you're training in an air-conditioned / heated environment with, a reasonable room temperature. Make sure that you're staying hydrated. Definitely make sure that you're breathing during the lift. You can try doing the lift with an open mouth brace. You can kind of look up pictures of Olympic lifters and see them doing snatches and clean and jerks with their mouth is open when they brace. And that can reduce intra-abdominal pressure and potentially help with your headache. But if that doesn't work, man, maybe just don't train your leg extensions to failure, since it only happens on that exercise. What causes knee shaking issues on heavy deadlifts, and how do you fix it? So unfortunately, man, it's primarily just a neurological issue. It's something that happens to me when I diet and get leaner and my body weight goes down. I will have shaking on barbell deadlifts, barbell RDLs. And to my knowledge, it's not something that you can fix, and nor is it something that you really need to worry about fixing because, again, it is neurological in nature. It's not really a form error. It's just a byproduct of the weight being heavy, and just keep getting stronger. Going beyond failure on tricep rope pushdowns specifically. So this isn't a question, even though you put a question mark at the end of it. So I'll give you a question instead, which is why? What's your reasoning? What's special about this movement that you think adding lengthened partials will improve the stimulus to fatigue ratio? Saying that I saw Joffrey Verity Schofield do it is not a good enough reason. Joff is an advanced athlete. He has his reasons for doing that. He's a guy with an endurance background who sometimes does 20 to 30 sets to failure per workout. Are your volume tolerances that high? Do you need a movement that's more efficient? If so, maybe using intensity techniques makes sense for you, but you need to understand the reasoning. Why would lengthened partials on this movement help? I have a mild to moderate flu. Is it worth doing a home workout, or should I just take a couple days off until I feel better? So my personal approach to being sick is completely all or nothing. Meaning, like, I am literally going to pretend like I'm not sick at all and do my completely normal training schedule just with some Dayquil and some Sudafed and like ibuprofen and even Tylenol if necessary, and of course a shitload of caffeine. Or I am literally just going to lay in bed and barely move, eating my normal food, of course, still, until I feel better. I take no half measures, and I don't do like little home workouts. Either rest or train. Pick one. Would you say that the 5 factors that are most important to bodybuilding are in the same order for powerlifting? So we're talking about genetics, drugs, lifestyle, nutrition, training. No. In powerlifting, training is markedly more important than it is in hypertrophy training. And the reason for that is very simple. Bodybuilding is this very weird sport where the stuff that you do to prepare for competition has nothing to do with the actual competition. What I mean by that is you get on stage and you flex and you pose. You don't lift weights. Imagine like you're doing a running contest, but to prepare for the running contest, you did trivia. I think bodybuilding is a really unique sport in that way, and that all the things you do in preparation have nothing to do with the sport. Powerlifting is very different. Powerlifting tests exactly the things that you do in training in the competition sport. And so the programming is highly specific because of that, and it matters way more. Is it weird that I want to train forearms, but I don't care about calves? I mean, that's like hardly unique. I would say the average meathead gym bro only cares about upper body. Like the average meathead gym bro does buys, flies, and tries, baby. Buys, flies, and tries. Chest and arms. Does anything else even matter? I mean, if you don't compete, just train whatever you like. Train to your own personal preferences. Who cares? Should I count sets for back or should I split it up into individual muscle groups? I don't think you should do either one, and here's why. Let's say you do a set of hack squats beyond failure with spotter assistance, and then you do a set of leg extensions with 3 reps in reserve. Do you really think that both of those should count as one set for quads? We both know that the hack squat set is way more stimulative and way more fatiguing. Back to your row example. Let's say you're doing barbell rows. Barbell rows are going to train the traps, the erectors, the lats, and the scapular retractors. It counts as volume for all of those. So add and subtract volume based on session-to-session performance. It doesn't matter the set count. Any tips to get better sleep? Sleep hygiene is going to be the key here. If you've never looked up that term or heard of that term, look it up now. But the core tenets are going to be things like limiting caffeine and alcohol before bed, having a temperature-controlled room. Studies consistently show like 55 to 70 degrees is preferable for most people. Comfortable pillows, comfortable bedding. Have your room completely blacked out, if possible, using blackout curtains. You want to have some sort of white noise or noise reduction in the room so you can't hear things to wake you up. And another huge key is going to be to have a consistent waking and sleeping time as well as a bedtime routine. Limit your electronics right before bed. Those are the biggest ones that will greatly, greatly improve sleep quality. How often should one rotate in new movements when progress plateaus? So the research consistently shows that for the first 6 weeks of introducing a new movement, most of the progress is mediated by neurological gains, which means it's not hypertrophy based. If you are struggling to keep in movements for at least 3 months consistently, I would question your programming more so than how often you need to be changing movements in and out. I probably average 6 months at least per movement. How does music affect mindset, and should we avoid certain types? That question makes a lot more sense, my friend. Well, at least you got a dickhead answer out of me about if you should avoid jacked people. But as far as music and training goes, the research does show that music improves people's performance in the gym. So that is a fact. Now, probably anybody that's been lifting for more than 2 seconds could have told you that you can perform better in the gym when you're listening to your favorite music versus when you're listening to nothing, or like the radio commercials that sometimes play in commercial gyms. But there are a few things to be mindful of, I suppose. If you're the kind of person who can get very aggressive when they listen to certain types of music to the point where you start to use too much arousal and your technique suffers, maybe chill out on that music, right? Another thing is if you're a competitive powerlifter and you get very used to being able to hear specific songs before all of your big lifts, please keep in mind that while you can give the meet director the music that you want to hear during your attempts, a lot of times they f it up or you can't hear it. So it might be to your benefit at certain points of the year to train without being able to hear your favorite song before you max out. For hypertrophy trainees, you're always going to be in control of your own music. So just be aware that music can increase arousal, which can increase the fatigue of the session, even if it also increases the amount of weight that you're lifting in that session. All right, I saved the best question of the day for last. At least it was the most interesting to me, and here it is. Do you equate more volume with muscle roundness and bubbliness, or do you think that is genetic makeup? First of all, I don't know, but that would be a boring answer if I just said I don't know. So I'm going to do my best to explain what I think is going on, and I think there's at least 3 things, and probably both of those things are true. So thing number 1 is there is absolutely a genetic component to the way that muscle bellies are shaped and the way that they look that gives it a certain roundness and 3D look that I don't think can be achieved by any type of training. For example, this is Phil Heath. We all know who Phil Heath is. This is Phil Heath playing basketball in college before he even started bodybuilding seriously. Already got round biceps, already got capped delts. Looking at him here in the bottom right corner, his upper body practically doubled in size, but even in his early competing days, there's a roundness and a bubbliness there right from the start. Second key point, there is a certain threshold of absolute size that you must hit before any sort of roundness can show up. Because before that point, you're just filling out your frame and you're still almost growing like outward. It isn't until you've filled out your frame to a really significant degree that there's a sort of maturity that happens to the muscle where that roundness can begin to take form because you're no longer simply filling out the frame. The frame is filled out, and the only way for the muscle to continue to grow is in a 3D fashion where it looks like you've gained more depth. This is not something that's just in my head either. I've heard, for example, Justin Harris from Troponin Nutrition talk about this. and he's helped as many people go pro as anyone else ever. So just because you're not round yet, you may simply have not reached the size threshold for your frame where that process begins to happen and you begin to get that density to build. Look at Nick Walker one more time. If you can just excuse the drop in model quality, point number 3 that I want to make is that there are non-hypertrophy adaptations that lead to major differences in the visual look that you get. In this bottom picture, I had just finished a 30-plus day run of 0 carbs while using fat burners, okay? In the top picture, it's a week after the diet. I'm using a small amounts of insulin, and I've been back on carbs. It's not the most dramatic thing ever, but you can clearly see very big differences in the roundness and fullness. And you see this a lot with guys that Milo Sarchev's coaches as well, is that when they're on the huge amounts of insulin that he uses in his protocols, there's an increased roundness and fullness to the muscle belly, the look of it anyway. And I think this can occur with higher volume metabolite-based training, so things with low rest periods, things with higher reps. It's conceivable to me that this type of training leads to temporary increases in substrate storage, both in terms of intramuscular glycogen storage and intramuscular triglyceride storage, so both carbs and fat stored within the muscle itself. We know that when you deplete, for example, glycogen, completely deplete it with a low carb diet and higher rep, higher volume training, that you can get a super compensation effect where your body temporarily stores more glycogen than normal once you bring carbs back in. And this is one of the tactics that people use for peaking in shows during bodybuilding shows. However, it's not that crazy to think that there are larger scale, longer term adaptations that are similar that can occur when you're constantly doing higher rep, higher volume, metabolite sort of based training. I think it's possible that this type of training leads to longer term, higher rates of glycogen storage, higher rates of intramuscular hydration, higher rates of intramuscular triglyceride storage. It leads to more energy substrate being stored in there. If you're constantly exposing muscle to glycotically demanding training that requires it to utilize very high amounts of carbohydrate or other energy substrate in order to survive the training and make progress within that training, it's not unreasonable to me to think that your body could adapt in such a way as to increase total glycogen metabolism and the ability to store it, use it efficiently, etc. This is exactly what happens with regular training, right? You expose your muscle to muscular tension, and that tension sets off these metabolic signals that lead to muscle growth over time. You adapt to the stimulus that's being provided. And in the research, we don't see hypertrophy differences, muscle hypertrophy differences when we're looking at higher reps versus lower reps. Everything from 5 to 30 seems to be about the same. But we do see differences in inflammation and swelling with higher volume programs. So to bring this back to what I said originally in one of those first couple answers, what if the difference in the look is actually not a hypertrophy-based adaptation, but it's glycotic in nature? And it allows people to hold more glycogen and thus look more full. I mean, you can see a difference in flat versus full, even on normal size people. So now imagine what that looks like when somebody has 100 pounds of skeletal muscle mass added, like a Phil Heath or a Ronnie Coleman. The difference in being flat and full is huge. And then you add another like bonus on top of that, where these people have become adapted to that type of training and are now capable of storing even more glycogen. That flat versus fullness could be even more, and that could be responsible or the answer to the long-held belief of whether or not there's a difference between sarcoplasmic and myofibrillar hypertrophy. Well, what if sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is actually not hypertrophy at all? It's just a massive increase in intramuscular hydration and energy substrate storage. All right, I apologize everyone for it taking me like 10 minutes to answer this question. It's because my thoughts were not well collected on this. It's not an answer I've written down anywhere before or spoken aloud, so it's a mess. That said, I will bring this to something useful. I don't think you should try to be a pioneer with your training. In other words, there's a lot of people and on social media right now that are saying you don't need to do anything other than like 6 to 8 reps on every single movement. You don't need to do any metabolite training. There's no value in low rest, higher volume work. There's no value in metabolite training. I don't think you should try to be a pioneer with your bodybuilding training. Every good bodybuilder ever has done a mixture of heavier weights, of volume, of metabolite work, lower rest period work, drop sets, rest pause sets, super sets, giant sets. They've all done a little bit of both, and I think we all should as well, because we have no reason to try and reinvent the wheel here. All right, everybody, you know the drill. If you like the video, like the video. Any comments or questions that you have, put them down below in the comment section, and I will get to it as soon as I can. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And, of course, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.